Muy buenas tardes, mi gente. Con ustedes, aquí la comadre B con otro episodio de Comadreando aquí y con café. Today is Valentine's Day 2024. Yes, feliz día de el amor y la amistad. Saludos a toda mi raza de corazón. I love you guys. Mom, I just seen her. I just seen you, Mom. I didn't give her a Valentine, but she knows I love her with all my heart. So, know this, guys. I appreciate you. I love you. Gracias por su amistad. Thank you for the support. Thank you for watching me. And, like I said, the continued support. I love and appreciate all of you guys. So, today is day 2 of the not so much Valentines, right? So, let's get into the topic, guys. Y les cuento. Alright, guys, so let's go back into time. The year is 1850, and we are in Farmland, Illinois. Now, this story is about a young girl by the name of Rhoda Derry, double R. Alright, guys, so let me tell you about Rhoda. She is the daughter of a well-to-do farming family. The father's name is Jacob Derry, and the mother is Rachel Derry. Now, Rhoda is the baby out of 9 children. So, yes, this family is freaking huge. But back then, it was very common, especially if you were in the farming industry, because it was free hands, free labor. You didn't have to pay your kids. Feed them, put them on clothes, and send them to school and come home and help out. That's how it was back then. Well, this family was originally from Fayette, Indiana, but they made their way over to Illinois because the farming lands out there were bigger, the opportunity was bigger, that kind of stuff. So Mr. Jacob thought that was the way to do it, and so they migrated, and that's where they made home. Well, Rhoda was, like I said, the baby. So I'm sure she had everybody's attention, maybe a little bit chiquiada here and there. And for the most part, she was a happy, healthy little girl. Estaba bien bonita. So she had that going for her. Time went by, blah, blah, blah. Like every typical teen, she fell in love. She was 16 years old. She fell in love with a kid from a neighboring farm. His name was Charles Phoenix. Him too came from a farming family. So, these two were just like head over heels with each other. Andaban pa allá y pa acá que no cabían because they were in just so much love. Right? That's the way it goes. So these two super in love kids, because he was 16 years old también, that's it. This is it. Charles was like, I cannot live without her. He proposed, Rhoda, will you marry me? Luego, la Rhoda le dijo, of course. And that was that. They were engaged just like that. Super excited, this little young couple shared their news with their family, Rhoda's family was happy. They were excited for her, Back then, it was a thing to do. People married very young. Like I said, this was 1850 here. So it wasn't uncommon. It wasn't like, what the hell? At least they were both the same age. So it was a good future union, right? Well, when Charles went home and told his family, la mamá, of course. No, I'm just playing. But yes, the mother was vivid, enojadísima. To begin with, she wasn't too hot with the idea que su hijo andaba con la muchacha, con la Rhoda, right? She was like, ugh. Okay, so in this whole area, the ranchitos right here, habían chismes, muchos chismes, que la mamá de Don Jacob se llamaba Mary, but she was in Pennsylvania, que era bruja. Supposedly, she knew witchcraft. She did hexes. She was a full-blown witch. That was the news going around, the area. So the Derry family had that whole dark cloud over them, over a family rumor of witches, right? So when Mrs. Phoenix, Charles' mother, found out que they were engaged, she told him all kinds of stuff. Lo regañó. You ain't gonna marry her, this and that, blah, blah, blah. The little boy's like, why? You know, I love her, she loves me, what is the problem? The lady's just like, she's no good for you, that family's no good, you know, blah, blah, blah. So little boy's just like, no, like, I want to marry her. So, yeah, you know, she told her son, leave her alone, I don't want you guys together. The little kid, the guy, he's like, nah, like, I'm gonna marry her. Well, this is where things get ugly. They get really, really ugly. Okay, Mrs. Phoenix took matters into her own hands. So, yeah, you know, the next couple of days she had an eye out to see if she would see Rhoda walking around. Because, you know, back then you walk everywhere, especially in these ranchitos that are all next to each other. Finally, a couple of days later, she chased down Rhoda when she seen her passing down the road. She went over there, le hizo un escándalo de aquellos. She got in her face, she was yelling, probably pointing the finger, talking about, I heard that you guys are engaged, you better leave my son alone, I'm not okay with you guys getting married, blah, 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 you're no good. And then she went on to the whole, your family's witches. I'm not sure what was said. All they said was, this is what a witness had seen and heard. But, there's a but. Why would witchcraft come up? You know, I'm assuming this lady told this kid, you come from witches, I know witchcraft too. Because the whole situation that got this girl in an uproar was that this pinche vieja told her, if you do not leave my son alone, te voy a embrujar. I'm gonna hex you. I'm gonna put a curse on you. You will never get rid of me. And it will be a horrible rest of your life. Rhoda, being a kid, 16 years old, no matter how grown you think you are, even though, yes, back when people matured faster, she's still a freaking kid. On top of that, yes, the family was known for witchery, brujas, whatever you want to call it. And she had a great fear of this entire world. Las brujas, witchcraft, hexes, sciences, todo eso. She was freaking scared. So she took off home, probably crying. I know I'd be crying if an old lady yelled at me all that stuff and then scared the shit out of me. She got home. She told her sister, hey, you know, Charles' mom just told me this and this and that. Whatever. It was evening time. They did dinner, you know, bedtime, go to sleep, whatever. The next morning, Rhoda wakes up and tells her sister and the mother, last night I seen a beast watching me. I think it was Satan standing in the corner of the room watching me. So, you know, the mom's like, no. You're just paranoid. All that stuff that vieja yelled at you yesterday. There's no ghosts here. There's no beasts here. Satan is not looking for you. So, you know, the sister's agreeing with the mom, trying to calm her down. No. But Rhoda wasn't too convinced. She knew what she saw and she was just freaking out. You know, she's real nervous all day. And this, guys, is what marks the beginning of the end for this poor muchacha. Alright, Raza. Right now, I'm gonna go ahead and give you a trigger warning. I should have done it to begin with, but this is where things start getting really gruesome, like ugly. So beware, guys. You've been warned. I'm gonna be sharing a lot of ugly and gruesome details. Alright, so as of today, present day, a lot of doctors and people that have read about this case and, you know, their personal and professional opinions are that maybe the family trait kicked in. Okay, for the most part, her mom and her dad were physically and mentally healthy. It is unknown what age they were at this point when Rhoda was 16 and everything started going downhill. But they do say that other family members had probably mental illnesses. They are not straightforward with maybe Mary, the mom, Mr. Jacob's mom. That's what she would say about witches and stuff. They didn't mention who, but they said family traits kicked in. Rhoda had her first huge mental breakdown after this day that, she had seen the beast at night. She was just somebody different. She was so paranoid, looking over her shoulder, looking to the corner, looking to the, sky, just looking all around, no matter what she was doing throughout the day, how many days went by, because it was weeks. She was just getting worse and worse that, this and this and so, and do you see that over there? She named the beast Old Scratch. So she would say, Old Scratch is watching me. Look at him, he's standing right there. Like, the family's like, you are seeing things? Relax. There is nothing there. Poor Rhoda was like, I see him, don't you see him? Paranoid. Estaba loca, like, se está volviendo loca. She didn't know what the heck. And she kept saying, last night Mrs. Phoenix was in the room. She's looking at me, this and that, blah, blah, blah. The mom would say, why would Charles' mom come to look at you while you sleep? Stop. You're just paranoid. She really put you in a place, you need to just let it go. She's full of shit. Charles already dumped you. You have nothing to do with him. Just, it's done. There. Forget about it. We have a life to live. Rhoda wasn't having it. She swore that she can see this and that. La bruja de su suegra. Like, she was just so freaking scared. Well, she had her first physical episode. She was just shaking, pointing, shivering, couldn't speak. Oh my God. Okay, now again, present day, the, psychologists, people of that medical field, psychiatrists, this and that, they say that she was suffering possibly from seizures and that she might have had a slight case of paranoid schizophrenia. So the things weren't really there, but she had mental issues. On top of that, she was suffering from seizures. So, of course, in 1850, none of this was heard of. The parents thought she was losing her mind. They started asking around. They were referenced over to a mental hospital of that time. Con todo el dolor de su corazón, they had to go and place their daughter into the care of this mental institute to try and get her help, because it had already been months and she's just getting worse and worse. And now with this first episode of shaking and not talking and point, like, they were so afraid and they knew she needed professional care that they could not give her. They ended up taking her to this institute called the Jacksonville Mental Hospital. She was here for 2 years. 2 years. It is unknown if the family visit her during her stay here. They don't have any records, so it isn't like it was jotted down. Like, they have just no records, period. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But during her stay here at Jacksonville, she still wasn't getting any better at all. She would continue to talk about Old Scratch. She would continue talking about Mrs. Phoenix watching her sleep at night. It got so crazy for everybody that the staff had to lock her in her room and tie her up in ropes at bedtime because she was just out there. Alborotaba all the other patients. So, she had everybody in an uproar talking about witches and, the devil and Satan, Old Scratch and su suegra la bruja. So it was kind of ugly. Now, every night they would lock these doors and put her in rope. And every morning she was outside, downstairs, walking the yard like no big deal. Walking around, talking to herself and looking at the clouds of birds, whatever there was to look at. And the staff would ask her, how did you get down here? Every single day her answer was, Mrs. Phoenix let me out. How did this happen? Who knows? Was Miss Phoenix really there spiritually? Like, what was going on that this girl was able to get out of ropes, able to open a locked door, and roam freely all freaking night with everybody just never minding it? Nobody saw anything. They don't know what she's talking about. So it was now evaluation time. And the person in charge of this institute, the Salem, she said, Rhoda isn't insane. No está mal. I don't know what's wrong with her, but she is not crazy. She even made a note on the file, and it quoted, she's like the man in the New Testament. She lives among the tombs. What the heck does that even mean? Just by the word tombs being in there, something spooky, right? So, con 2 años ya cumplidos, this Salem, this institute, they had to let her go. It was the law that if in 2 years the patient wasn't cured, they had to be returned to their family, returned home, because they were officially labeled uncurable. This place cannot do anything for them. The family was contacted. They made their trip, came and picked up Rhoda and took her home. Now, the first couple months, they were already used to her behavior. So, it was just assuring and this and that, que no hay nada, relax, this and this and that. But then again, she started having spells now where she would pass out. Same thing, the seizures that we now know of. And she was just like spinning out of control again. Possibly she needed medication. Who knows? We won't know. We won't know this. They had her home for a couple years, 2 years, 3 years, and she was just too much. They could not deal with her. They ended up again finding a different place to place her in to get her the medical help that she needed because they couldn't deal with her. September 3rd, 1860. Rhoda was admitted to the Adams County Alms House. Now this, guys, was by far the worst decision ever. Ever. Pobre sus padres, sin saber, they go, they take her here, they, sign the paperwork over, thinking, hopefully this is what she needs. This Adams Almhouse becomes home to Rhoda for the next 44 years. Yes, 44 years. So to start, these almshouses were known to be bad news. They were also known as poorhouses or poor farms. Exactly what it sounds like. People of all walks of life in those areas came to these houses and like shelters. There were poor people that could not afford their own life, so they needed help, and they would come into these facilities so they can have what they needed as far as shelter, place to sleep, clothes, and food. This is what their main purpose was, these almhouses. Now, a lot of people in that time started bringing in their family members that had mental illness because they couldn't or didn't want to deal with them. So these places, these almhouses, were full of the poor and the mentally unstable people. That is what you would find here, along with regular civilians that were appointed by the state to watch these people, help out with the washing of clothes, the feeding time, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And they weren't the nicest people in these facilities. As you guys know, there is always the whole power trip, I am in charge, blah, 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 you are poor, you are mental, that kind of stuff. Yes, sadly, this is what these almhouses were like. Now, these were officially opened and became a thing in 1819, which was exactly 1 year after Illinois became an official state. Once again, it was regular, civilized people like your neighbor working here. So they had no real training, they had no real knowledge of what to even do to run these places. So the lack of information for mental illness, and obviously the lack of training, because they were just your neighbors down the street, was the reason why these places were the way they were, full of abuse. That's what a lot of these patients had to deal with throughout their times here. Adams Elm House had a total of 101 inmates, which 36 of those were mentally insane. Notice how they would refer to them as inmates, not patients. Inmates. I get it. Some were poor people that needed the refuge there, pero still, they're not inmates, they're people. I don't know. To me, allí ya empezamos mal. They are patients, not inmates. So now we go to the treatment of these patients, right? They were treated very, very inhumanely, especially Rhoda at this time, because she was uncontrollable. They ended up putting her in a straw basket, and that's where she had to sit. That's it. She had no option, or else corporal punishment, I don't know, but they made her house a straw basket. That's it. You do not move from there. That is where you're gonna stay. A little bit later, she graduated to a wooden crib. Now, if she is uncontrollable, deal with her. Have a special one-on-one. Try to get to the bottom of it, not just put them in a crib. This crib wasn't like a baby crib where you could just lay there. No, this was a special type of crib. It was designed by another psychiatric doctor by the name of Mr. Briam. Now, this was called the Utica crib. The top had a hinge lid, and you could put a lock on it. It did have wooden planks around like a crib. The bottom had a tray that would slide out, so her restroom stuff can just dump on the floor. She was sitting in straw. She was nude because they took her clothes away from her. All she was allowed to hold onto was a little canvas blanket, which she would always try to cover herself with. Now, the measurements of this crib, like I said, were nothing comfortable. It was 18 inches deep, de arriba para abajo, 8 feet long. So if you were laying down, you were okay, because it was 8 feet long and 3 feet wide. So yeah, picture a kennel for a puppy. That's how big this crib was, which was home to Rhoda for 44 years. They neglected her so bad. This poor woman never took a shower while she was there. She was covered in lice from head to toe. And since there was straw in the crib with her, the ratones, the mice, even climbed in there with her and had nests next to her. Her legs were completely up towards her chin because obviously she didn't fit in this 18-inch deep crib. And this is how she stayed for many years. Many years. She was super malnutrition. So she was literally skin and bones. Her shoulders were hunched over because her muscles just deteriorated because she would not move from this position for so long. She's stuck. Se quedó así, in that position. Being locked in this crib and neglected and ignored for so long, she wouldn't even talk. Who would she talk to? She lost full ability to speak, so she didn't even talk anymore. Nada. Okay, now here is where this whole case gets super, super suspicious, okay? Supposedly she had real long nails, which is believable because obviously they grow, and if nobody's trimming them for you or giving you any kind of hygiene, they're going to be there. Supposedly she gouged out her own eyes. Se sacó los ojos, ella sola. Was this really something self-inflicted? Or did somebody there do it to her? Possibly another patient? Maybe a staff member? Who knows? But she had no eyes. Her notes, her file, there was also a report that she was a violent hitter to herself. Supposedly she was covered in bruises from head to toe, that she would punch herself continuously, super hard, so hard to the point where she punched her own mouth and all her teeth fell out. Again, is this the truth? Or did somebody do this to her? You know, having a nonverbal person, how can she even communicate that? Or who would she even tell that would care, right? Está sola. Throughout these 44 years of her being in this asylum, because that's what it was, her family didn't visit her. This place did keep records of certain things, visitations, and you know what she's doing and this and that. There's nowhere, anywhere that her family would come in. How is it that you can forget you have your child in a place like this? I get it, you're trying to have them receive medical help that you cannot give them, but you can't check on them either. How can you sit here and not wonder what your child is going through? You know, even though she was already in her 30s or whatever, that's still your kid. You know, you have your children, you're older, those are still your children, those are your kids. How can they have not checked on her? Nobody, not even her siblings, having 8 more of them. That is crazy to me. But again, that is what her record said. No visitation, no eyes. She pulled them out herself. She broke her own teeth. And they had her as a compulsive eater. That the moment she came in contact with any kind of food, she would eat anything and everything. Now, we go back to her being malnourished because they would starve her. Of course, when she came up on food, she's gonna eat everything. I don't know. You know, me personally, I don't eat on my time. By the time I get to eat, I'm just eating even the napkin. I don't care. It is what it is. It's the truth. Imagine going days without eating. Of course, she's gonna eat anything that she can possibly feel around her. So this is the conditions that Rhoda lived in at Adams. She was officially blind, officially unable to communicate, had no muscle, and she was now stuck in this position where the only way she could get around is hopping around on her knuckles. Imagine that. Now comes along some hope. Okay, late, pero better late than never, right? Okay, so in another town over, another city, Peoria, Illinois, there's this man. His name is George Zeller. He is now the new director of a asylum out there, a really big one that's called Bartonville. Now, he's a doctor as well. He has training, he has knowledge of the mentally insane people, how to treat them. I'm pretty sure medications to give them if there was any at the time. So he was the big shot now. Big shot. Like, wow, He had this big facility. It was bigger than Adams, but it was a professional facility. It wasn't these almhouses, these poor houses, these poor farms. This was strictly a asylum for the mentally insane, the mentally unstable people. Well, he came upon Rhoda's file, her case. He was reading about it, and he found it very hard to believe that witchcraft would have a person in this situation where now she had no eyes, she couldn't speak, and she resembled a toad. He couldn't picture what the heck this file was about. So he made the trip over to Adam's outhouse to go see it firsthand. He wanted to go see these 36 mentally unstable people because he was interested in bringing those to help them, over to his facility, because he said these people need help. They don't need to be sitting in a shelter. He took that trip. He went over there and he couldn't believe his eyes. Yes, it was that freaking horrific that it left him with that impression that he couldn't shake. Immediately, he started paperwork to get these people transferred over to his facility. All of them. He signed them on, this and that, blah, blah, blah. When they came to Rhoda's case, he specifically placed a note on there. Send her along, God bless her. He then put on his hat, went back to Bartonville. He waited for the transfer of the new patients that were arriving. Se fueron todos en tren. All 36 of these patients traveled out there. When the staff that was there to receive them at the train did their head count, they were missing one. They did roll call, whatever, names. Rhoda was missing. So they went on the train. They started looking around. There was nothing. At the back of the cart, there was a laundry basket. So one of them walked over there to see what the heck, did they get, transferred out here with dirty laundry? Like, why is there a laundry basket out there? Rhoda was in there. Obviously, once again, the condition of her body obviously didn't let her sit like the normal people that traveled with her, other patients. So they just threw her in a laundry basket and left her in the back of the cart in the train. When the staff that saw it was her, he called another staffer for help, and together they carried this laundry basket up the hill and over to the building, the facility. So it was Rhoda's turn to get evaluated, right? You know that with therapies and when you see psychiatric help and stuff like that, counselors, you always have to have like an intake, and they sit there and they evaluate you. Well, he had small talk with her, walked around her. I guess he was explaining to her the way life was going to be for her here. And for the first time in 44 years, Rhoda smiled. She gave a big smile. Obviously, she couldn't see, so just the voice of Mr. Zeller was enough to comfort her soul. She couldn't see, she couldn't talk, so there wasn't much she could really do but smile. And that's what she did. Every time she would hear his voice, she would just smile. After that initial evaluation, they bonded immediately. and she tugged at his pants. That made him feel the bond right back too, and yeah, after that he had this huge meeting with all the staffers here, the nurses and everybody there, and he told them, this is a very special case. I personally feel very sorry for her, and I'm gonna make it my business that this story never repeats with anybody. So we are gonna take care of her. He assigned her to certain nurse. You're gonna shower her, you're gonna bathe her. She's gonna have a bath every single day. You guys are gonna give her meals, 3 meals a day. And for right now, you're gonna get rid of all that lice that she has. Okay, her skin condition was horrible. She would sit in her own filth. Nobody ever took the time to make sure that her hygiene was up to date or nobody cared. They don't even know how many times she even showered while she was at Adams. For the first night in 44 years, that night, Rhoda slept in a bed. In a bed, guys. Horrible, right? Something as simple as a bed that we might all take for granted was for her the biggest and most prized item that can be handed to her. She slept in a bed. For the first time, Rhoda was treated like a human being. She was at ease. They weren't reports of her having her outbreaks anymore. Maybe because she couldn't communicate, but she wasn't all paranoid that, she couldn't see, she couldn't talk. For 2 years, she wandered this facility very comfortably, although she would hop around on her knuckles because she was obviously not mobile. And she even made a very best friend there. So yes, for 2 years, it was improvement. And all thanks to Dr. Zeller. Bless his heart, right? The nurses would all give her undivided attention. She was never out of anybody's sight. So she was 100% cared for. Maybe this nurturing is what she needed to, make her better. Dr. Zeller tried to get the whole backstory because all her files said was witchcraft, witchery, witches. He contacted the old house where she lived, but at this point, the only person that was there was now a cousin of hers by the name of Benjamin Briggs. Now, he answered to Dr. Zeller and he explained to him that obviously everybody's dead. The whole family's dead except one of her brothers, but he's somewhere else. He's the one left there at the family home, and he tells the doctor that Rachel, Rhoda's mom, would also start talking about demons and witches and evil spirits, and she was even known to be shooting guns at these imaginary evil spirits. What was really going on? Who knows? Was it really something that Mrs. Phoenix cursed them with? How is it that the mom's seeing it too if the witchcraft, the witchery runs on Jacob's side? That was his mother, Mary. What is really the problem here? What's really going on? With not much information, there was really no backstories or anything relatable to Dr. Zeller. So it was what it was. That's it. Rhoda was just there. At this point, she was a 70-year-old lady. Una viejita, yeah, she was old. Dr. Zeller made it his point to make her case as public as he could. With all the horrific details and just looking at this poor lady, everybody was super interested in her case. What had happened? No eyes. Why is she in such bad shape? Why can't she sit up? You name it. The newspapers ran stories about Rhoda, aka Rhodey, for a long time. Yeah, this got nationwide attention. It was horrible. Now, Dr. Zeller, like he had told his staff, this ain't gonna happen to anybody ever again. He made it his point, his business. That's it. This is what I'm going to do. He would write letters to legislation telling them, come over here and check out my patient. I want you guys to look at her because we need to pass different laws in the way that different asylums, different facilities take care of their mentally unstable people, the mentally insane. So the way they did her, nobody deserves to live that way, ever, or ever again. That's it. It's done. Like I said, he would push the paper stories, this and that, legislation. Everybody would know about Rhoda. Everybody. Many changes started happening because they started investigating these almhouses. And in fact, they found that the way they were treating their patients was so inhumanely. And the way the houses were up to code of any kind to be caring for anybody, period. Not even just the poor people. Anyone. They closed down so many of these almhouses. That's it. There was no more. You were either an asylum, a mental institute. That was it. Ya no había poor houses. Ya no había poor farms. No more almhouses. That was it. It was mental institute, asylum. That is it. So thank you, Dr. Zeller. You be in forever glory because you did all of our mentally disabled people a very big difference. You really did. Well, sadly, on October 9th of 1906, Rhoda Derry passed away. She was one day away from turning 72. A lot was done because of her horrible life that she lived. It was just so unfortunate. The TB epidemic was huge at this time. So it is unclear. It doesn't say if that was her cause of passing, but possibly because it did hit Bartonville. She was buried on grounds in the back. Grave number 217. No name, no dates, no nothing. Just 217 there at the Bartonville Asylum. In 1909, this asylum became the Peoria State Hospital. So it changed hands, it changed names, everything changed. All the patients that passed away there were still buried out in the back. And 80 years later, the family put a marble marker on top of her number. She wasn't just 217 anymore. There is a great nephew of hers that is very active in visiting her, this and that, spreading his great aunt's story of how the unstable, mentally disabled people were treated back then. And the marker on top, I will read it out because it is a lot. It says, they built this place of asylum so that no other human would suffer as you. You taught us to love and feel compassion towards the less fortunate. May you find peace and warmth in God's arms. That's what the marker says. So I'm pretty sure Dr. Zeller is very content with that because together they made a movement. They really did. Now, when Rhoda passed away, the only ones at her gravesite were all the nurses that cared for her, other staff, feeding this and that, and of course Dr. Zeller. Now he says that when her little funeral was done, the services, they all went back to work up in the facility, and that the nurses cried. Nobody felt as if a horrible burden had been lifted. In fact, they were all heartbroken that she was gone. Everybody felt so horrible, like she was taking her life away from her for so many years. It was all taken for granted. It was very sad. Dr. Zeller then wrote a letter to the county court and said, nobody else lived her life. May nobody else live her life. And there will be nobody that can ever replace her in this world. And it's the truth, you know. That was it. That was her file. That was her case. That was Rhoda Derry. Very, very sad. Heartbreaking, right? What if Mrs. Phoenix would have just let her son have a life? Be his own person, marry this girl? What would have happened? Okay, now again, birth date to death date. 72 years to the date. I again go for the whole paradox of death. Was possibly her mission to sacrifice her entire life to open up the door for other mentally disabled people? I don't know. Now, we sit here and think, was Mrs. Phoenix really a bruja too? Did she possibly curse them all? Like, why would the mom see things as well? Or was this family trait they speak of some mental disability that came from the mom's side of the family? All these notes and records were never really clarified. Nobody ever had anything on file. So it is so hard to even have an actual conclusion to Rhoda's case. Like, what the heck? Maybe also family trait de su abuela, Mrs. Mary. Could she have been a medium and everything she saw was actually real? And she just didn't know how to deal with it or how to react to it? What was Rhoda's true case? What happened? What happened? So many questions, guys. Obviously, we will never know. Pero may she be at peace finally and without pain of any kind. Y pues that's what I have for you guys today. Have a beautiful, beautiful holiday, guys, of Valentine's. Los adoro, raza. Bye.